This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
You know, I was on social media and I was complaining about how it feels like we don't know how to argue about things that we disagree with, because whenever somebody says something that you disagree with, we catch a whiff of that and then we start arguing with whatever straw man we're used to arguing with. So what I wanted to do was kind of throw that out and try to engage with opinions that I disagree with for the most part, and argue with them hopefully in a constructive way to where I not only communicate where I'm coming from better, but also engage with the actual arguments being made, not the people in general I feel like are making those arguments, the actual argument that's being made, engage with that argument, and then seeing what happens from there, right? I can't complain about how people argue without trying to do something a little different. So this is me trying to do something a little different. So I asked for arguments on why people thought that Kevin Stefanski should be fired, because I am a 100% not in that camp. I got some arguments. I picked what I felt like were the four, it's hard to say best, the four arguments I felt like people gave enough information in to actually critique. Like, there were a lot of them where people just left like a sentence or two, and that's not a real argument. Like, the four best attempts at a argument for this, I really tried to find it. I'm not gonna lie to you, there weren't a lot of good, like, just structural arguments. So you're not going to see the best arguments in the world propped up here, but that's what I'm trying to do today. Where, for those of you who want Kevin fired and watch my stuff, I am going to hopefully give you some clarity, or, you know, maybe you're just going to disagree with my disagreement and continue to disagree. But let's get to it. First argument comes from Clay, who says, he does his job well and doesn't treat, oh, this isn't even an argument against. He does his job well and doesn't treat him as someone bigger than the team. He learns from his mistakes and isn't afraid to do, name a head coach in the past 20 years or something that could say to them anything near the caliber of Kevin Stefanski. Now, I agree with this take in most part. The only issue, and the reason I brought up this, because this is a common example of a general take that somebody will have in the fan base. The only issue I have with this, I agree with it in principle for most part. The only issue I have with it is we shouldn't be measuring the Cleveland Browns off of the bar of what the Browns have done before Kevin Stefanski. Maybe before Kevin got here, yes. But now that we're 4 years into the Kevin Stefanski experience, I think we should really set our aim towards what everybody else in the league is doing. And that's the bar that Kevin Stefanski should be measured against, because the Browns are trying to win a Super Bowl, not necessarily trying to be the best team since expansion, right? They're trying to win the Super Bowl. And if that's the goal, if the goal is the Super Bowl, you're not going to get there if the franchise's bar, their measuring stick for success, is the same or isn't the same as everybody else's, right? Like, if your bar for success isn't the same as your competition's, then you're probably not going to beat your competition. So that's why I included that one in there, even though I agree with it in most part. All right, my guy Knight 2012 Mayor says he tortured Baker on purpose. throwing 45 times with the busted wing while Chubb stood on the sidelines. Kirk Cousins is better without him. He consistently made dumb decisions. 2 knees and an arm punt at halftime in a close game with timeouts in D-Hop this year. Please cite what game you're talking about so I can reference it and see if you're telling the truth and if there was more context. He kept Joe Woods a full year and a half after Miles publicly bashed him. He lost the Denver game by not running the ball and instead throwing it with the rookie quarterback against the NFL's second worst rush defense. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were complaining that the Browns weren't running the ball, it was mainly after DTR got hurt. His play calling lacks imagination. Clearly, Watson isn't comfortable with the offense. He refused to use Chubb and Hunt like smarter coaches do. He decided PJ was NFL quality. He is not. The first game he coached, he called a fake punt on our own 30 because he's smarter than Harbaugh. He wasn't. We lost 36-6 just off of the top of my head. The Denver game was the worst BS I've ever seen. He can stay coach, and I think he just sucks as a play caller. All right, let me engage with this, just the points that are being made here. I'm going to first start by saying when I say things like most arguments against Kevin Stefanski are just actually bad arguments, I mean stuff like this. This is like, there's some stuff in here where I think Nightmare goes like further than I think a lot of people would go to on the Fire Stefanski side. Like I haven't heard some of these arguments in general, but this is generally what you get when you come into a anti-Kevin argument. And I think this is why people react to anti-Kevin arguments so harshly, because they're just fundamentally bad arguments 99% of the time. And if I'm judging by what I had to filter through to get to this argument being on this show, it just proves my point even further. Like, I asked for the best arguments, and this made the cut. This is how bad these Kevin Stefanski arguments are just from a structural basis. So instead of just saying it's a bad argument, let me tell you why I think it's just a structurally bad argument, right? Let me not make a bad argument about bad arguments. One of the reasons I think this is just a functionally bad argument, that makes it a textbook bad argument, is that this argument is full of opinions asserted as if they were facts. That's just bad. You can't do that. That's not a good argument. If you did that in court, you get thrown out immediately. That's just not a way to make an argument. And then not only are you asserting opinions as facts, these opinions are only supported by hyperbole, not actual facts and information. You're supporting your opinions with more opinions. They're not even like, hey, I think he's bad because of this and that. It's all hyperbole. Even some of the times where you do defend a fact, opinion as a fact, the facts are wrong. For example, the first thing you wrote here was he tortured Baker Mayfield on purpose, throwing the ball 45 times with busted wing. Baker Mayfield threw the ball 38 times in that game. The fact that that's the first thing in your sentence and you said it, it just makes me question the entire argument and how much research you did for this argument and how much you actually thought about having this opinion before going to this level of extremeness with this opinion. It really does make me wonder about that. But that's just an example. That's not an indictment on the whole thing. There's another example of hyperbole without information. Kirk Cousins is better without him. Well, what makes you think that? What supports that? There's nothing there. Says Kirk Cousins is better without him. And then he consistently makes dumb decisions. You moved on to another point. So why do you think Kirk Cousins is better without him? Like, if you're going to state something as a fact and then walk away, it can't be an opinion, one. And two, if it is an opinion, it better be a very commonly held opinion, right? Like you can't just put something nebulous out there, state it as a fact, walk away and think that's a good argument. It's not. It's not a good argument. It's just rambling at that point, right? Like there are like 5 facts in the world or 5 opinions in the world you could throw out there, not support, and people won't question. This is not one of them. Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback without him. That's not one of those 5. I'm sorry. Like, that's nuts to me, man. Let's see. He lost. There were more in there. He lost the Denver game by not running the ball. Again, that's an opinion. You could support that with some numbers. It wouldn't be hard to, but you did not do that. And the other issue with this argument that is full of opinions, not supported by anything within the argument itself, and it just comes off as rambling to me. It just comes off as rambling, and the only people who will agree with you are the people who also just want to ramble and have a feeling in their gut that they don't like Stefanski, and they're going to say anything to justify it. So if the point here was to convince anybody that Kevin Stefanski should be fired, this is a bad argument. This will not be successful. The only people who will agree with this is people who don't like Kevin Stefanski. At best, it's manipulative as an argument because, again, a lot of opinions is fact here. So, like, at best, it's a manipulative argument. At worst, it's a straight up disaster of an argument. And I think you really did your point a disservice here. Now, too, let me engage with some of the points you made, because I think the other thing in this argument that's bad is your opinions that you propped up as facts to prop up your bad argument, I think in themselves are actually bad arguments. So the first thing you said here, the first opinion you asserted as a fact, is that he tortured Baker Mayfield by making him throw 45 times and leaving Chubb on the sideline. I already addressed Baker threw the ball 38 times, not 45. So that's a mistake on your part. Also, too, Baker Mayfield was cleared to play. I know you mentioned that he had a busted wing in your argument, but Baker Mayfield was cleared to play. He chose to play. And if he felt like he couldn't execute the game plan, he shouldn't have played. He should have made that decision to not play. He made the decision that he could execute the game plan. So I don't want to hear any bitching and moaning about that. Just me personally, I don't find that as convincing. Baker Mayfield decided to play that game. If he couldn't execute the game plan, he shouldn't have tried to go out there. If he told Kevin that he couldn't execute the game plan, Kevin wouldn't have played him. We've seen Kevin do this, by the way. Like, we saw Kevin, once he saw it was obvious that Deshaun could not execute the game plan, get Deshaun Watson out of there. Baker Mayfield's faults in that game weren't because he couldn't physically execute the game plan. It's because he just couldn't physically get the ball to where he wanted to, because he stinks at times. So there's that. And let me not say he stinks. He does not stink. But he's inconsistent, and this was one of those stretches where he was inconsistent in the wrong direction. And in that stretch of games, he did stink. Like, straight up, he did stink at the end of the 2021 season. And that's all on him, because he chose to play. If he wasn't healthy enough to not stink, he shouldn't have played. 3, the issue that I have with just this one statement, the third issue, is the context is ignored. Yes, Nick Chubb had 12 carries. Now, you said he was on the sideline, which is implying that he got like 1 or 2 carries, but he got 12 carries, which isn't enough. But if you're wondering why he didn't get more carries, well, there's probably a reason for that. 10 of the 13 drives that the Browns had in that game got 1 or less first downs. Baker turned the ball over, I think, 2 times in that game. He wasn't productive as a quarterback. He could not execute well. He did not get first downs. If the Browns would have gotten first downs, extended those drives, I promise you Nick Chubb's numbers would have looked much better. But when you can't get first downs, when a lot of your drives are 5 plays or less, which 10 of their drives were 5 plays or less, you're probably not running the ball that much. So, don't know if that's on Kevin. That sounds like an execution issue. His second point that I'm going to go at is the Kirk Cousins is better without him. At best, for you, this is just debatable. It's not a fact. It's honestly, it's just, it doesn't seem like it's true. Like, there's not undeniable evidence that Kirk Cousins is better without Kevin Stefanski. Honestly, there's more evidence pointing to the fact that he was better with Kevin. A couple pieces of evidence that I have here. One, Kirk hasn't advanced past the first round of the playoffs since Kevin Stefanski was the play caller and offensive coordinator in 2019. So take that with what you want to take it with. Also, Kirk's QBR for a full season has never gotten higher than the 60.4 that he got with Kevin Stefanski since he left. Again, full season. He had a better QBR this year in 8 games, but who knows what that would have been over 17 games. He played less than half the season. So in a full season, he hasn't reached that. And his 2019 touchdown to interception ratio matches his career high in a full season. At best, man, this is debatable. It's definitely not walk away from it and call it a fact levels. If I'm being just nice to you and if I'm being charitable to the point you're trying to make. Using Chubb and Hunt together like smarter coaches. I have no idea what that point was supposed to mean. I'm going to be charitable here and say you mean what I've heard a lot of people say, which is 22 personnel, which means put both the running backs on the field at the same time. Again, I'm going to be lenient here. Your point was so vague that I can't really go at it. But if your point was that you need to put 2 running backs on the field and you think that that's what smarter coaches do, no team in the NFL runs 22 personnel or 21 personnel, which is 2 running backs, 1 tight end, or 2 running backs, 2 tight ends on the field consistently. Nobody, not a single one. So if smarter coaches do it, then there's no smarter coaches in the NFL. Again, please clarify your point, but that point is right now, I have to say it's invalid. This one too, like you threw a weird shot at PJ Walker in this argument. He decided that PJ is NFL quality. One that sounds like an Andrew Berry decision, like Andrew Berry decided to bring him on. If you really don't think he's NFL quality, but 2, when it comes to calling somebody NFL quality, PJ Walker was the quarterback on a team that beat 2 above 500 teams, one of those being the San Francisco 49ers, who are playing in the NFC Championship this weekend, and then came a tip ball away from beating a 3rd team. Like, at the very least, PJ Walker is NFL quality. And by the way, he had a track record in the NFL. He's had good games in the NFL before he was a Cleveland Brown. The Browns didn't decide that PJ Walker was NFL quality. PJ Walker's resume in the rest of the NFL decided that PJ Walker was NFL quality. The Browns weren't the first team to sign him from the XFL. They're like his 6th team to sign him since he's been graduated Temple. So yeah, he's NFL quality. The league has decided that. You don't get to decide that at home and tell somebody that's played multiple games, started like 10 or 15 games in the NFL, that they're not NFL quality. That's complete horseshit. It's a complete horseshit argument to say that PJ Walker is an NFL quality. Get out of here. Get out of here. What do you know about that? And even the things that we could know about that, you don't make any of those arguments because, again, you just threw that point out there like it was an undeniable fact and just walked away from it. And that's just bad argument. But that's a lot of these arguments that I get. Then you cherry picked a handful of play calls you don't like from a 4-year sample, which, okay, sure. I'm pretty sure you could do that with anybody. I'm not going to really debate cherry picking. Like, yeah, I could bring up 4 great play calls in the last 4 years and say Kevin's the best play caller since football was invented. That doesn't really make my point. So cherry picking, it's not a valid way to make an argument. I do think you have 2 points I find reasonable. I'll give you this. You said he kept Joe Woods too long. I agree. Kevin did something about that though. He fired Joe Woods and then he brought on Jim Schwartz. So your first reasonable point, he did something about that. Watson is not comfortable in this offense. That's another reasonable point. He's doing something about it. He fired the offense coordinator. So if your 2 issues with him that I find valid in this argument, because I just kind of discussed why I thought all the other points are kind of just horseshit, or that, then why is Kevin a bad coach? It's a horrible argument. All right, let's move on to the next one. Hopefully we get a better argument here. My guy Scheuer Lawn Care. And he says, I think Kevin Stefanski is a bad coach because he has never gotten the most out of his players over the year. He couldn't get the most out of Baker, and Miles is still underperforming. It just seems, let me stop editorializing. It just seems like he never has us prepared, especially for big games. I believe he is 1-2 in the playoffs, and with one victory coming from Pittsburgh, he wasn't even calling the plays. His overall record is not good, just 7 games over 500 in 5 full seasons. I would love to see what the record ranks against opponent NFL coaches. Our team leads the NFL in turnovers this year, and we are one of the most penalized teams in the league, but we love Stefanski. All right, Scheuer. Now, this isn't about Scheuer's argument. This is just in general. So this is not a critique of his argument yet. But like, this is the stuff that people put out there, and then reasonable people see and take like issue with it. And sometimes people are a little bit too harsh in their reply to an argument like this. But people will see it and call out all the obvious issues. And then the person who says it says something like, oh, see, look, I said I didn't like Kevin. And you see how people react. Because like, you can't, the issue with this argument is similar to a lot of the issues with the argument in the past. You can't list your opinions as facts and then not support those opinions with facts. A lot of it here was just saying stuff. And a lot of the stuff you were saying is easily debunkable. So if you do say something like this out in the wild and you don't think about it, and then people who do think about it see this and then they reply to it and to tell you, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't get mad, because that's exactly what happened here. Again, Scheuer, I appreciate you as a viewer, but this argument is full of just lies. First argument. You said he never got the most out of players. And then you included Baker Mayfield and Myles Garrett underperforming, which I'll address individually. So he never got the most out of players. I'll name 4 players who have not reached the same highs that they have reached with Kevin before or after they got with Kevin. Now, 2 of these players are currently on the Browns, so we don't know what happens. Well, all 3 of these players are currently with the Browns. So before they were with Kevin, they had somebody else, right? David Njoku had other coaches. David Njoku has inarguably had his best year of his career this year. He's a Pro Bowler. He almost made an All-Pro team. He's had career high in yards. There's no argument that this is David Njoku's best year under Kevin Stefanski. When Kevin got here, we were talking about cutting David Njoku. So like, if you don't, that happened. So one, never gotten the best out of players. He got the most out of David Njoku so far. Wyatt Teller, traded for a 5th round pick, was not seen as that good of a player in 2019 under Freddie Kitchens and John Dorsey. He's a multiple-time All-Pro player. He is like a 3 or 4-time Pro Bowler. I would think it's safe to say that Kevin Stefanski and his staff has gotten the most out of Wyatt Teller. Baker Mayfield, who you mentioned as a player he did not get the most out of, has never had a better touchdown-interception ratio than he had with Kevin Stefanski, and has never even come close to having the same QBR, 65, that he had with Kevin Stefanski. Even this year, he was like a full 10 points below it. He was like at 53 or something like that. So debatable, but not even a convincing debate. You can easily make the argument that 2020 was still Baker Mayfield's best year of his career, inarguably. And Amari Cooper, who's had plenty of coaches before Kevin Stefanski, has reached his touchdown high 2022 and his receiving yards high, both under Kevin Stefanski. So your first statement here that Kevin's a bad coach because he's never gotten the most out of his players, certified debunked. That's just not true. You said never, not some. You said never. It's certified disproven. So that's not even argued. That's debunked. Miles is underperforming is an interesting statement, given that Kevin Stefanski lets his defensive coordinators handle that side of the ball. So even if your issue was that Miles was underperforming, that's more of a criticism on the defensive coordinator. And then it's a referendum on whether Kevin should fire or not fire Jim Schwartz. So I ask you, do you think the Browns should fire Jim Schwartz? If you think the Browns should fire Jim Schwartz, then that is Kevin's fault for not firing Jim Schwartz and not getting the most out of Myles Garrett. Then, okay, cool. Okay. But if you don't think the Browns should fire Jim Schwartz, then your defensive criticism should be for Jim Schwartz, not Kevin Stefanski, because Kevin's in charge of hiring or firing Jim Schwartz. But as far as how that job gets done, that's Jim Schwartz. So again, even if you think Myles is underperforming, it's weird, but not really Kevin's fault unless you want that defense coordinator fired. 2, it's not true. Like, Myles isn't underperforming. I don't think he fits the definition of underperforming. He's had 2 seasons in which he broke the Browns sack record. He's had 16 sacks, which is a lot for anybody. He had 14 sacks this year, which is a lot for anybody. Like, it's not a cookie crumb number of sacks. And he might win Defensive Player of the Year. If having 2 seasons of back-to-back, the Browns have had like 3 guys get 10 sacks since coming back since expansion. Now, again, expansion's not the bar, but still, Myles Garrett, if he wins Defensive Player of the Year this year, these 3 years are going to be enough to get him into the Hall of Fame. If you call that underperforming, I guess. But come on. Please be for real. Be for real. Like, unless your legit expectations for Myles is to get 23 sacks every year, then I don't care for this argument that Myles is underperforming. Because even if that's your case, the expectations are far too unreasonable for that to be a legitimate argument. And then you had another statement. It just seems like we are never prepared for big games. This is such an exclusively circumstantial statement. Like, you can just say this and attach it to one game and then make it sound like it's true to anything. But Kevin prepared the team during the week for the 2020 wildcard game. They were prepared and ready to go for that. The 49ers game this year, Kevin prepared them for. That was a big game. They won that one. The Ravens game, the second one especially, was a huge game. The Browns won that one. Thursday Night Football to clinch the playoffs, that was a big game, right? They seemed pretty prepared in this. So all games that the team was prepared for. So I mean, like, even that 2022 wild card game, the 2020 divisional round game, nobody's saying the Browns didn't look prepared in that game. So they were prepared for that. It's a big game, right? So it's a super circumstantial statement. And it's not true. And it all hinges on your definition of what a big game is, which, I mean, is flimsy ground to start an argument on. So I think that statement's kind of bad. 1 victory. Oh, yeah. Also, like, I saw people do this, and I just want to address this in general. It's a separate of my argument with him. I saw people say that, like, since Alex Van Pelt was the play caller during the playoff game, he deserves the playoff win. I don't know who's doing that, but that's ridiculous, because, like, if you're saying that to take away Kevin's playoff win in 2020, okay, but Kevin was the play caller in 2019 when the Vikings won the playoff game. So does he get credit for that? Serious question. Serious question. For those of you who like say, hey, well, he didn't coach in that 2020 game. He wasn't a play caller. Okay, well, he was the play caller in 2019 when they won a playoff game. Not the Browns, but the Vikings. So, like, does he get credit for that? Or does that not exist? Okay. Cool. The penalties thing, I will give him this, right? Oh, no. Before I get to that. Oh, he brought up his record. He said his record is bad and it wouldn't stack up well versus current head coaches. Hey, just a piece of advice. If you're going to throw something out there like, man, I bet his record doesn't even rank well against other head coaches, take the extra 10 minutes to actually figure out if what you're saying makes sense. Because it's a real easy way to avoid making yourself look like an asshole. Kevin Stefanski's current record or win percentage is 13th in the NFL. That's right below Kyle Shanahan. That's above Doug Peterson, Dan Campbell, Mike Vrabel, Zach Taylor, all people that have been deemed good coaches. So, not really an effective argument. And you really went out on a limb there for something that you really shouldn't have. You just should have looked that up. The one thing I do give you credit for is the penalty thing. The penalty thing is a legitimate point. Kevin does need to clean up the penalties. He had 115 this year, or at least the team had 115, which is third most in the NFL. And in 2022, they were 11th. In 2021, they were 7th. In 2020, they were 8th. You don't want the Browns in the top 10 in penalties, or even near the top 10 in penalties. So that should be addressed. That's a legitimate criticism of Kevin Stefanski. His teams have accumulated far too many penalties over the last 4 years. Not necessarily a reason for him to be fired or to deem him a bad coach like you did in this statement beforehand. But, it's a criticism. Like, for sure, he should definitely find a way to get those penalties cut down, and that should be a priority for him. Absolutely. So that's it with that argument. Let's move on to the last argument of the day. I like Stefanski, but it seems as if the team just gets outcoached 2 times against the Pats. In last game, handling the DTR in the Ravens game probably cost them the division. Offense with Watson and DTR seems like oil and H2O combo. And the defense was soft with no counter. Okay. I asked this gentleman for clarity, Michael Hunter, because I want him to define what outcoached means to him. And how else would he wanted to handle the team that doesn't require 2020 hindsight, the DTR point. And then I wanted him to explain number 3 and 4 in more detail. So Michael was able to, he wasn't able to define what outcoach means. He just gave me some scores. He said 38-15, 45-7, 45-14. It's not like Brady was a QB for the Pats either. So he's saying the team got blown out. And if you get blown out, that means you get outcoached, but I don't think that's a proper definition, because that just means you got blown out, and good coaches get blown out all the time. That doesn't mean that they got outcoached. And again, my issue with this first point is outcoach is such a nothing term. It means everything and nothing at the same time. It just means whatever the person saying it wants it to mean. But nobody can universally agree on a definition for outcoach. Once we can agree on a definition for outcoached as an NFL community, I'll start receiving outcoach as a legitimate criticism, but it's impossible to engage with that point because it's based off of a term that we have no definition for. And even when I asked him what his definition could be, it was not an actual definition. He couldn't come up with a definition. I can't engage with that point. So number 2, the handling of DTR in that first Ravens game. I asked him about this and he said, if your quarterback can't throw, then change the game plan for DTR and let Watson run if healthy, not vice versa. Okay. This is hindsight. This is a solution you can only think of with hindsight. I asked for something that wasn't hindsight 2020. I got something that still was hindsight 2020. This really is, because if there's no logical way you can say that the Browns should have thought, hey man, we should prepare this whole week as if Watson can only run the ball when he's complaining about a shoulder injury, and then prepare DTR for everything else. I don't find that as a reasonable solution, especially if your plan is to have Watson run and DTR throw when Watson got hurt by getting tackled. and then he missed 5 more weeks after this. Like, obviously the injury was serious. So I don't know what that plan is. And even without your plan and factoring that into your argument, DTR himself admitted that the issue was that he himself did not take the week seriously. And as a rookie, he had no clue how to prepare. So even if the Browns said, hey, DTR, you're going to start this week. You're going to be the starter this week. Deshaun's not playing. We probably get the same result. Like, I think sometimes that's just a rookie being a rookie. And I don't think it cost them the Ravens game in the division, because the Ravens are one of the best teams in the NFL. You think we just gonna sweep them because DTR didn't play? Because what, PJ Walker plays? You think we're just gonna beat the Ravens? That's a ridiculous assumption. It's ridiculous. You think PJ Walker beats the Ravens? As much as y'all complain about PJ. Well, now y'all, as much as some people complain about PJ, it is not reasonable to assume because PJ Walker starts that week, you beat the Ravens. It's not even reasonable to assume the Browns fully healthy beat the Ravens. It's not a reasonable assumption. That's a toss-up at best. So that whole DTR thing cost you the division. Man, if somebody else played, or if Deshaun Watson were healthy and there was a play call in there or something, that would be a more reasonable argument. But come on, dog. You lost that game by like 28 points. You think one quarterback change is going to be what flipped the outcome there? The game wasn't even fucking close. No, that premise is just bad. I reject that premise for number 2. Offense with Watson and DTR seems like oil and H2O combo. Again, valid. Like, it doesn't seem like it's fit well. I would say that we're using this off of a combined 6 games of information. So maybe it just needed more time to gel. But it didn't look super smooth, and they're clearly making moves right now to adjust that. So even if that is a criticism, it's a criticism that they have already started to address. The defense was solved with no counter. You can't give Jim Schwartz all the credit for things going right and then blame Kevin Stefanski if something goes wrong. You just can't. Kevin hired Jim Schwartz to run the defense, which means Kevin is accountable on whether the Browns should hire or fire Jim Schwartz. So unless your argument is that Kevin should fire Jim Schwartz right now, or that Kevin should have never hired an assistant of the year candidate in Jim Schwartz, then this point means nothing. So you can't tell me that's a criticism of Kevin Stefanski unless your argument is that Jim Schwartz should be fired, because Jim Schwartz is tasked to make those adjustments and to counter the adjustments to his adjustments. If you don't think he's the right person, then that's Kevin's fault. But if you do think he's the right person and you're mad that no adjustments got made, well, you should be mad at Jim Schwartz. So again, if you're going to make this argument about defense on Kevin, it's fine because Kevin is the head coach. He's in charge of the whole thing. But with the defense in particular, his options are fire or fire Jim Schwartz or not. Is he the guy or not? So unless you're arguing that the Browns should fire Jim Schwartz this offseason, then I really don't think any criticisms towards the defense are really valid towards Kevin Stefanski, because that's his option. So those were the arguments against Kevin Stefanski. I really tried. I tried to find some good arguments. And maybe when I do this again, more people will have better arguments. But that's my take on this. I don't think that I saw anything that was convincing or more even illuminating. Most of the things that were pointed out as issues, we kind of know. The penalties thing, we knew that was an issue coming into it with Kevin. The offense not being a great fit for Deshaun Watson, we knew that coming into this whole video, this whole process. So that's my thoughts on those Kevin Stefanski arguments. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.